the agency to make their own decisions. And yet, the reality is that there is critical information that's often scientifically based that goes through early warning systems. And how do we marry that tension between, actually, you really need to listen to this, but actually, we're not going to quite tell you exactly what you need to do. I'm just wondering, I see Elliot in the audience there, who's formerly of the WMO, who's been highly instrumental behind the CAP. And I'd love you, Elliot, to share your thoughts on this, because you've been building a formal system that does carry the weight of information coming from scientific agencies. How do we marry that with what Lisa has just said, which is we can't really tell people what to do?
I could go without a mic.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things that we're hearing a lot about is people want to collapse the scientific understanding into something like, just give me a color. Tell me if it's red or yellow or green. That doesn't work, because what you're really saying is, I will decide for you how much you need to pay attention to this without knowing anything about your context. So for example, in CAP, we have urgency, severity, and certainty. Urgency, how much time? Severity, how bad is it? And certainty, how sure am I that's even going to happen?
Okay, can you just explain the CAP? Could you break down the acronym?
Oh, Common Alerting Protocol. Sidebar. You are probably familiar with emergency alerts that go out as a press release. It's essentially a piece of text. That doesn't work because we can't machine process them. So it's very limited data. It's okay for one-on-one, but if you want to show it on a map, if you want to process it, if you want to do after-action analysis of what happened, you need a structured data. So we have a common alerting protocol, which is essentially a business form for the business of alerting. But just on this one aspect of how do we, in other words, empower people to make their own decision, if you boil it down to a color, you don't know why is it red. Is it red because it's happening real quick? You don't have time to react. Or is it red because all of a sudden we're more certain? Think of a terrorism. The certainty is what's changing when the color goes to red. But a hurricane, it goes to red because it's going to be here in 12 hours. Okay? Whereas the severity might be in another system for a volcano. It's because it's going to be a really big explosion. So we've got to be careful about collapsing the information that's available just because people want it simple. Now, in the actual place where they act on it, they're going to simplify it their own way. But if I have my grandmother lives with me and I need more time, then I'm going to set my expectations of how to deal with an alert very differently than some college kid who's like, well, I can get out of here in 15 minutes, so just tell me if it's happening right now.
Thank you, Elliot. Okay. The lady in the yellow shirt.
Hi. My name is Cynthia. I'm from World Vision, Mexico. And my question is, in this era of information, we are the most disinformed generation of all. Because we are so exploded with information, but it's really difficult to differentiate between fake news and the real news. And also because, as you already pointed out, there's a lot of bias in the news. So how we perceived the information we are going to give out to this new generation that's really questioning everything that they see every day, and how, for example, in our part as NGOs, we are giving out information as we perceived it in their communities and our work in daily basis. And as a communicator, that's a really big challenge, because we are limited by how people perceive the organization per se, rather than the accuracy of the information. So what would you say, and how can you help us to communicate it better, not telling people what to do, but to really try to drive them to a way that they can get information that's more relevant to them in risk reduction, for example.
Thank you very much. Anne, perhaps you could reply to this point from the Ugandan context. Are your communities deluged with information? Do they need help in navigating the best sources of information? Do they have that challenge? Let's hear from Anne.
Thank you so much. I think I would like to just correct something. I think communities know the situation they are in. They know, they can tell when disasters come, they know the risks they are faced with, and they actually on a daily basis have coping mechanisms to navigate out of them. And so if we are to make communication risk, people to be prepared, we have to engage the communities. I think communities need to come out at the forefront and talk about their realities and how they think those realities can be addressed. And I think media has a very good opportunity to invest in this. Media can actually take advantage of people's participation in, for instance, citizen journalism, to be able to actually pick the realities that are going on the ground. But also media can take advantage of reporting, instead of reporting only when we are faced with emergency. I think media can take an opportunity to begin profiling preventive actions, profiling the need for people to think preventive and not wait for disasters to come.
Thank you, Anne. Marla, you have a question.
Can I just do
Yes.
it loudly? Okay.
Yes.
I'm curious about, how many of you, are there how many of you in the sense of community of, risk communications professionals who've really thought about and read about and researched this, are there in the world? Do you have a community of practice of some kind? And do you have any burning research questions?
So at NOAA, our risk communication is kind of grouped in our social sciences. We are economics, social and behavioral sciences. So as a community, we're small. We're still growing, especially being in a physical science agency. But one of the things that we are interested in is risk perception and risk preferences. So this kind of relates back to your questions. How do these change over time? Because now we have fake news. We don't know we do, but some people don't know how to distinguish what's right and what's wrong. And because our preferences are changing, and these changes impact how our human behavior in the face of upcoming extreme environmental events. So what we need to start researching this. We need to start looking at this more, how our perceptions of risk and how our preferences of receiving our information change over time. Because unfortunately, when it comes to risk communication, what works well today might not work well tomorrow. We need to be constantly evolving with our changing times.
Yes, I would add, Marla, that there's a real dearth of people that understand risk modelling, that understand hazard, exposure and vulnerability, and can link that with communications expertise. There's a real need for a cadre of people that can understand both sides of this. So we need to train the risk experts and the risk modelers in the communication side, and we need to bring in the journalists and give them better literacy in those issues. And there isn't enough work, sufficient work, let alone research, going on in those areas. Marcus, you have a question.
Yeah, so it's Marcus from the Global Network. I just want to pick up a little bit more on the example that Anne was using, because like Anne, I think there's a lot of good ways that the media can engage in this governance issue. We've heard over the last couple of days already that risk governance is coming out from all different angles, is critical to this resilience agenda. And I think in doing that, what we're effectively doing is we are strengthening the social contract between states and their citizens, And governance, inclusive governance, is part of that. And the media has multiple roles that it can play in supporting that. But my question is, when the media starts to engage in those roles, essentially it's engaging in what is a political process. And I just wonder, given the current incentives within our media, the ownership structures within our media, you know, the government regulation and controls over media, just how far can the media go in really engaging in these political processes that actually are, you know, it might not have the right incentives to want to go down that path, even though it could clearly have a key role.
Lisa, do you have any thoughts on that?
There are ways to do it, and it's being tried all the time in countries that are quite tight with media freedom. In fact, I think that disaster risk reduction is a very convenient topic to be able to push those boundaries on, because it's a somewhat non-threatening issue. It's an issue that's relevant and critical to everyone who's listening to the media, and I think that's where local media experts are going to be the best. They'll know exactly how far they can push it with the government, how to push it a little bit further, what skills to use, what tone, what style, what questions, who to invite. And I think it's about taking incremental steps in order to open up a wider conversation the best way you can.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. Question at the back there, our last question before we move on to the final section of this evening.
Okay, since I don't know what the final session might be about, I'll just go ahead and ask it. I'm Josh from Food for the Hungry. In social behavior change parlance, we talk about positive deviance, and I think I've heard comments tonight in several cases about instances of positive deviance, and I wonder if any of you or anyone in the room for that matter has had any kind of experience with highlighting positive deviance in the media, whether it be community members or even government officials or government departments. I mean, you know, when we work in places like Kenya where governments devolve, you know, the devolution of government to more local levels, you know, can we, for lack of a better term, toot the local government's horn when they do good things in terms of DRR and resilience, and you know, showcase that to other governors or other government departments. I mean, has anyone had an experience with that? If not, I want to talk to you because I think there's a lot there. So.
Right, experiences of that at the individual, family or community level? Can the panel point to any experiences?
So in our South Carolina flooding service assessment in the United States in 2015, we found that, this doesn't relate to the report, but it relates to the question, people are still driving through flooded roadways. So there's signs that say, turn around, don't drown, this road's flooded, but yet people are still driving through them. And in America, they say they have a truck, so they're okay. They won't flood. Not the case necessarily. But one of the things now, we're testing it. We haven't done it yet, but we want to kind of change our messaging. So instead of showing, so we have the message, turn around, don't drown. What do we show? A car driving through a flood. So what if we change that? What if we show a car approaching the flooded road, then turning around? So I don't know if this is going to work, but it's one of the things that we're looking into testing with regards to our messages.
Is anybody from Indonesia here? Indonesia? No. Oh, there's something in Indonesia talking about positive tooting the horn or showcasing positive behavior of local politicians. There's a show, I think, called Integrity Idols. Has anyone heard of this? No. Well, it's sort of a reality show competition, kind of an X Factor style of local governments. And, yeah, again, encouraging more positive behavior.
Okay. The lady who's been putting her hand up. Yes, you. The lady who's not from Indonesia.
Hablo fuerte, no hay problema. I have the speaker stronger.
Okay, don't worry about the microphone.
I prefer to speak in Spanish because I have a lot of information where I want to ask many things, and for me it's going to be more easy in Spanish. Lisa, maybe you can understand me or nobody? I can tell you.
Puedo entender muy bien, pero traducir.
Okay, it's the same with me. I can understand it well, but it's difficult of me to speak all of this. En México, yo tengo investigaciones. In Mexico, I have investigations about the young people and the journals. But the problem is the young people don't believe in the media. All the people in Mexico don't believe in the media, and they prefer the information from their friends, and that's a big problem. It's more easy to the people to believe in their friends, but they don't have the true information. And the journal, well, in Mexico, the journal is. They have many problems. I don't know if you know that many journals are killed. They're dead because to make their profession. But that's one thing. They don't believe in the media. In the media. That's a big problem in Mexico. The second thing is we don't have journal prepared to give information about the risk communication or the disaster. We don't have prepared or climate change. That's another problem. And I think that is not the problem, only the problem in Mexico. Maybe it's in Latin America and Africa. I don't know what happened. But it's a big problem here.
Thank you. So those issues of trust, actually the safety of journalists, where do they play into disaster risk reduction? So how important are they?
Critical, whether it's about factual information or not, trust, and I know that research says this over and over, and the credibility of the source is imperative.
Can we move on to our final discussion point? How can we improve? How can we improve the enabling environment for risk communication? We've already touched on many of these issues. Actually, the way that risk information flows through the media is influenced by a whole number of things. Media infrastructure. We look at the 80 most vulnerable countries to climate change. A recent study by Yale University showed that only two of those countries had comprehensive media infrastructure and early warning systems to reach the most vulnerable populations. So media infrastructure is part of this. The media freedom, the press freedom environment is another part. And that third piece, which has just been mentioned, trust. Actually, many media channels, official ones, are distrusted by communities exactly because they are official media, or they may be commercial channels that don't have the trust. So that's a key issue. I'd like to ask the panelists, what are their final sort of one-point observations on what can we and must we improve in risk communication to put it, and in media, to put it at the service of the DRR sector that's gathered here in Cancun. Let's start with Deb.